I want you to raise your hand if you grew up being told to eat 6 to 11 servings of bread, cereal, rice, and pasta every single day. Yeah, me too. And now look at us. We followed the food pyramid. We ate our whole grains like good little citizens, and somehow we ended up the most obese, most medicated, most chronically sick population in the modern world. Kind of weird how that worked out, right? Well, the government finally admitted that your grandma knew all along the pyramid was garbage, and they just flipped it upside down. Now, here's what's at stake, and I promise this is more fun than the last few, because for decades, the federal government told Americans that the foundation of a healthy diet was carbohydrates. Bread, cereal, pasta. The stuff that spikes your blood sugar and leaves you hungry an hour later. Meanwhile, obesity exploded. Diabetes became an epidemic. Heart disease, autoimmune disorders, depression, anxiety, all through the roof. And what did the system offer? Pills. Ozempic, statins, antidepressants. A lifetime subscription to the pharmaceutical industry. RFK Jr. said it square. Studies from Stanford and Harvard show anxiety, depression, and mental illness are directly tied to diet. Change the inputs and the diagnosis start disappearing. See, that's not fringe science. That's an existential threat to an industry built on keeping you sick and dependent. No wonder Big Pharma is sweating. You see, speaking of being prepared, folks, real food matters, and so does having enough of it when things go sideways. That's why I trust my Patriot Supply. Right now, they've got a special deal on a 3-month emergency food kit. Save $100 while supplies last. Over 2,000 calories a day, for 90 days, real meals, no MSG, no junk, packed in sturdy buckets, lasts up to 25 years. Made in the USA. Go to preparewithgary.com right now. It's preparewithgary.com, because when the world gets crazy, you're going to want some real food, not the stuff that made us all fat in the first place. Now, the FDA commissioner, Marty McCary, made it official. The base of the pyramid is gone. No more recommending high cereal, bread, grain, and pasta intake. They're moving to a science-based approach that prioritizes protein, not the Fauci science. Right? Let that sink in. The government has now admitted everything they told you for 50 years was wrong. Dr. Oz went even further, saying that these changes will massively reduce the need for weight loss drugs and expensive autoimmune prescriptions. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins called out both parties, saying federal incentives have pushed low-quality processed foods for decades while sidelining America's farmers. And then someone on social media made a great point. When RFK Jr. talks about eating real food, people actually listen. You know why? Because he looks like the result of his own advice. Can't say that about every health official that we've had, right? Now, this is the corrupt history, the food guide. Remember this? The guide to daily food choices. Fats and oils and sweets used sparingly. Milk, yogurt, cheese, only 2 to 3 servings. Meat, poultry, fish, dry beans, eggs, nuts, and nuts group, only 2 to 3 servings. Vegetables, 3 to 5. Fruit group, 2 to 4. 6 to 11 servings of bread, cereal, rice, and pasta. That is the corrupt history. And don't you love it how they make it into a pyramid? Just like the Illuminati, right? Sure, that's no coincidence. Whoever made this up? 1970s food pyramid should be investigated. This is what it looks like then. This is what it looks like now, I guess. Protein, dairy, healthy fats, vegetables, and fruits. So protein and vegetables and fruits right at the top. Whole grains down at the bottom. And if you look at it, it makes sense. The most nutrient-dense foods all the way at the very top. You can just see it. You know all those foods are nutrient dense. How many breads have you eaten that are not? Let's go to the, let's see, this is Dr. McCary, FDA.
We have ended. It was a big day for school lunch programs, for school districts, houses of worship, food served at military bases, people trying to figure out what should I be eating. And we have ended an era of medical dogma where in the past, the only thing that has been recommended is to avoid fat. And fat was the boogeyman for really no good scientific reason, except that it was the dogma passed on generation to generation. We are no longer recommending high cereal, bread, grain, pasta, food pyramid base. That is the big part of the food pyramid. We are moving on to a scientific-based approach to say we need more protein. There's not enough protein in the diet of the vast majority of kids. Mm-hmm. We've increased the protein guideline by 50 to 100%. You want whole grains, that is, grains bound to fiber, fruits and vegetables, and there's nothing wrong with fat. You don't need to serve kids low-fat foods like low-fat dairy. These are natural, healthy, saturated fats, and we say that in the report. It was a big.
And what about olive oil? You know, like I drink this olive oil every day. C60 Evo olive oil with ESS 60. This is supercharged olive oil. But I mean, olive oil on its face is just good for you. This stuff's even better, but like that's a healthy oil. I want to get to the briefing. Here's Dr. Oz.
What the president, do want to express my appreciation for what the president has done overall to increase the affordability of healthcare. The biggest accomplishment, perhaps, for the health system, ability to drop down prices last year was the most favored nation drug pricing that Caroline mentioned. These are incredibly effective at reducing the costs, for example, of what the president calls the fat shot. The Ozempic, GLP-1s category of medications. We dropped them dramatically. But the best way to reduce drug spend in America is to not need the drugs in the first place. What you're hearing today with these dietary guideline adjustments are going to be massively effective, and not just dropping the need for us to buy these weight loss drugs, but buy the expensive drugs for autoimmune problems. We have evidence that food is medicine when it comes to conditions for various mental health issues, from Alzheimer's and depression to fundamental realities of how children learn in school. I do want to express my appreciation for what the president has done.
Here is the HHS Secretary RFK Jr. talking with Laura Ingraham.
People to eat.
Puts red meat and veggies at the top. It moves the grains to the bottom. Tell us why.
Red meat, protein, eggs, poultry, any kind of healthy protein. Today, about 50% of the calories that our children eat are ultra-processed food or highly refined carbohydrates, and it's literally poisoning them. And that is the result of a food pyramid that was driven by mercantile impulses that put Fruit Loops at the top of the fruit pyramid. We now have a science-based food pyramid that is based upon the most recent best science. And it's telling people to eat proteins, eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and whole grains. And that is going to transform the American dietary culture.
Madam Secretary, puts red meat and veggie.
Transformative of the dietary culture of this nation. So the entire nation is going to get healthy again. Make America healthy again. Secretary Rollins, here we go.
Crisis in our nation. America is in the middle of the worst chronic health crisis in our nation's history. Over 40% of the roughly 73 million children in the United States have at least one chronic health condition, and nearly 90% of healthcare spending goes toward treating people with chronic disease. Secretary Kennedy mentioned that, but it is really important to keep underscoring that fact. This crisis is unacceptable. It prevents Americans from living healthy and happy lives. And for decades under both Republicans and Democrats, federal incentives have promoted low quality, highly processed foods and pharmaceutical interventions instead of prevention. As a result, nutrient-dense whole foods grown by America's farmers and ranchers have been increasingly displaced. The Trump administration is acutely aware of this danger, and today this announcement is making a major step in doing something about it. Thankfully, the solution is simple and should be non-controversial. Eat real food. This is the main message of the new Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2025 to 2030, which encourage households and schools to prioritize whole, nutrient-dense foods. That means more protein, more dairy, more healthy fats, more whole grains, more fruits and vegetables, whether they are fresh, frozen, canned, or dried. We are finally putting real food back at the center of the American diet. Real food that nourishes the body, restores health, fuels energy, and builds strength. This pivot also leans into the abundant, affordable, and healthy food supply already available from America's incredible farmers and ranchers. By making milk, raising cattle, and growing wholesome fruits, vegetables, and grains, they hold the key to solving our national health crisis.
We're going to solve our own problem just by shifting how we eat. Here is the Secretary Kennedy at that same briefing.
Public health advocate. Today marks a decisive change in federal nutrition policy made possible by President Trump's leadership and the work of MAHA moms and public health advocates who demanded reform. Today, in accordance with President Trump's directive, Brooke and I will release the Dietary Guidelines for Americans 2025 to 2030, the most significant reset of federal nutrition policy in history. These guidelines replace corporate-driven assumptions with common-sense goals and gold standard scientific integrity. These new guidelines will revolutionize our nation's food culture and make America healthy again. For decades, Americans have grown sicker while healthcare costs have soared. The reason is clear. The hard truth is that our government has been lying to us to protect corporate profit-taking, telling us that these food-like substances were beneficial to public health. Federal policy promoted and subsidized highly processed foods and refined carbohydrates and turned a blind eye to the disastrous consequences. Today, the lies stop. The new guidelines recognize that whole, nutrient-dense food is the most effective path to better health and lower healthcare costs. Protein and healthy fats are essential and were wrongly discouraged in prior dietary guidelines. We are ending the war on saturated fats. Diets rich in vegetables and fruits reduce disease risk more effectively than many drugs. Whole grains outperform refined carbohydrates. Added sugars, especially sugar-sweetened beverages, drive metabolic disease, and today our government declares war on added sugar. Highly processed foods loaded with additives, added sugar, and excess salt damage health and should be avoided. As Secretary of Health and Human Services, my message is clear: eat real food. Nothing matters more for healthcare outcomes, economic productivity, military readiness, and fiscal stability. The dietary guidelines shape dozens of federal feeding programs, including Head Start. These standards affect 45 million school lunches every day, meals for 1.3 million active duty service members, and food served to 9 million veterans in VA hospitals. Today begins the work of aligning those programs with affordable, whole, nutrient-dense food. Implementation requires coordination across the government. I'm working with many of my fellow cabinet secretaries to deliver results. Today marks a decisive change in federal nutrition policy made possible by President Trump.
So you just heard him right there. RFK Jr. calling this the most significant reset of federal nutrition policy in history. This administration, day in and day out, is just changing the face of this nation. Physically. RFK Jr. is right. Press secretary confirming it. The guidelines are built on science and hard facts, not special interests or partisan ideology. Real science. Not the trust the science version. They got the website set up, realfood.gov. The old pyramid, it kept Americans sick from the bottom up. Carbs at the foundation, sugar and everything. And a pharmacy on every corner ready to sell you the cure for what the food gave you. The business model took a hit just now. The pyramid got flipped. Proteins at the base. Real food is back. Big Pharma just lost a whole lot of future customers. So look, we all remember that poster on the wall in elementary school. The food pyramid, eat your grain. Trust the experts, and we did, and we trusted them. They made us fat and sick and dependent on medications to fix what the food broke in the first place. This is not a conspiracy theory. That's what the government just admitted. RFK Jr. and the Maha movement didn't just tweak the guidelines. They flipped the entire pyramid upside down. Protein at the base, real food over processed garbage, science over corporate interests. See, Dr. Oz says this is going to crush demand for weight loss drugs. Big Pharma's freaking because prevention doesn't generate recurring revenue. Healthy Americans are bad for their business model. Well, too bad. The pyramid is dead. Real food won. So should the people who push the old dietary guidelines, should they be held accountable? Were they getting money from somebody? That went on for a long time, didn't it? Let's talk about it in the comments and grab some gear from the merch shop. It's linked below.
The system controls information. Information control is power. They don't want you to see this. The truth only survives together. They don't want this shared. Share this now.